This is called Mrs. Roopy Is Loopy. But in this is YouTube, I have no idea why she is just in here. I just want to show her because she is my second favorite doll. Third favorite doll, and I like her. And she's cute. And her name is Chocolate Cake Cat. And this is from Afro Meow. Tried to get that in Walmart. And I don't know where you could get some more. I just know that you can get them in Walmart. And let's go to the YouTube. And there is 3 chapters. Chapter 10, Chapter 11, Chapter 12. And 12. The evidence. Just admit it. The proof. Now let's go to the video. Really go to the video. Chapter 10. The evidence. Page number 63. There were 5 minutes left in recess. Brian, Michael, Andrea, Emily, and I sneaked in from the playground through the door to the library. I said, as we tiptoed into the library. Follow me. Lucky for us, the library was empty. Mrs. Roopy was probably eating lunch in the teacher's room. On our hands and knees, we made our way past the non-fiction books to Mrs. Roopy's office. The door was unlocked. I opened it. We are going to get caught, Emily said. We are going to be kicked out of the school and thrown in jail for the rest of our lives. And here, I said, ignoring Emily, this is where we'll find the evidence. We were inside Mrs. Roopy's office. I wanted to turn the lights on, but Michael told me that when his father is doing a secret investigation, he never turns the lights on. We tried to see the best we could with the lights that came through the window. Do you see any evidence? Michael said. Not yet. It was just a bunch of boring stuff. Pictures of Mrs. Roopy's daughter, papers, videos, junk, no evidence at all. Let's get out of here, Emily said. I'm scared. Not yet, I said. There was one closet by the corner. I pulled the handle. It wasn't locked. And there inside the closet was all the evidence we would ever need. George Washington's uniform, Little Bo Peep's dress, Johnny Appleseed's overalls, Neil Armstrong's spacesuit. Every single costume Mrs. Roopy had been wearing was hanging right there in the closet. This is the proof, Michael said. All those people were just Mrs. Roopy, dressed up in costumes. I told you so, said Andrea. You did not, I said. Did too, she said. Oh, you think you know everything? I said, well, you're not so smart. That's when the light flicked on. It was Mrs. Roopy standing in the doorway, looking at us. What's the meaning of this? She asked. She had her hands on her hips, so we knew she was mad. She was mad. For some reason, grown-ups always put their hands on their hips when they are mad. I had nothing to do with it, and just said it was all Asia's idea. Everybody was looking at me. I had to think fast. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life in jail. I grabbed George Washington's uniform out of the closet. What's the meaning of this? I said, holding up the costume. You told us you were homesick in bed. George Washington was here instead of you. How do you explain the fact that George Washington's uniform is in your closet? Huh? We all turned to look at Mrs. Roopy. She just stood there for a moment and then she broke down crying. She was sobbing and big tears were running down her face. It was so sad that we all gathered around her and gave her a hug. Emily was crying too. This is horrible, Mrs. Roopy said, wiping her eyes with a tissue. You'll be okay, Miss. You'll be okay, Mrs. Roopy. Andrea said. We'll get you some help. No, it's horrible, Mrs. Roopy cried. George Washington must have left his uniform in my closet when he was here. Do you know what that means? What? It means George Washington is running around somewhere with no clothes on. Chapter 11. Just admit it. Page number 71. It was no use. Even after we proved to Mrs. Roopy that she was dressed up as all these characters, she still wouldn't admit it. Mrs. Roopy is in denial, Andrea said when we got back to the classroom. I'll bet you don't know what that means, AJ. Sure, I know what denial means, I said. It's that a river in Africa, not the Nile. Dumbhead. Denial. It means she can't admit to herself that she has a problem. So what are we supposed to do now? Michael asked. There's only one thing we can do. And just said, we got to tell Mr. Clutch. Mr. Clutch is the principal, which means he is like a king of the school. One time I got into trouble and I was sent to Mrs. Clutch's office. When I got there, he didn't punish me. He gave me a candy bar. Mrs. Clutch is nuts. Mr. Clutch is nuts. We told Miss Daisy that we had to speak to Mrs. Clutch. With Mrs. Clutch. Mr. Clutch. And that was a matter of it was a matter of life and death. She called the office. In a few minutes, Mrs. Clutch arrived. Mr. Clutch has no hair at all. We told him all about the crazy things Mrs. Roopy has been doing and how Andrea's mother is a psychologist. And she thinks Mrs. Roopy might have a big problem. We are worried about her. Really worried about her, Emily said. This sounds pretty serious, Mr. Clutch said. Maybe we'd better go have a little chat with Mrs. Roopy. Mr. Clutch led us down the hall to the library. When we got there, Mrs. Roopy was lying on the floor under the treehouse. She was holding her head like it had been hit. Not only that, but Mrs. Roopy was really fat. It looked like she had gained about 1,100,000 pounds. What happened, Mrs. Roopy? Michael asked. Are you okay? Mrs. Roopy? Who's that? Mrs. Roopy said. My name is Humpty Dumpty. I was sitting on that wall up there and I had a great fall. Don't tell me, Andrea said. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put you back together again, right? How did you know? Mrs. Roopy asked. You're not Humpty Dumpty, Andrea said. You're Mrs. Roopy or librarian. Just admit it. It doesn't matter who it is, Mr. Clutch said. There has been an injury. I need to write a report and give it to the Board of Education. You can give it to me, I told Mr. Clutch. I'm bored of education. Everybody laughed, even though I didn't say anything funny. Mr. Clutch said he had to go call the doctor for Humpty Dumpty. Mrs. Roopy got off the floor and dusted herself off. Wait a minute, I said. I have a question. Yes, AJ? Asked Mrs. Roopy. Your name is Humpty Dumpty, right? What I want to know is, why did your parents name you Humpty? I mean, if their last name was already Dumpty, they could have named you John or Jim or Joe or something normal, but they had to go with and name you Humpty. Well, actually, Humpty is just my nickname. Mrs. Roopy said. My real name is Lumpy. Lumpy Dumpy, I said. Yes, said Mrs. Roopy. So you can see why I'd rather be called Humpty. Andrea was getting all angry now. Mrs. Droopy was simply not going to admit she wasn't Humpty Dumpty. Nursery Rhymes Week is over, Mrs. Droopy, and just said, "You can be yourself. You can stop pretending to be other people." "Don't you like nursery rhymes?" asked Mrs. Droopy. "Sure I do," Andrea said, "but enough is enough. I hate nursery rhymes. I said, "Nursery rhymes are dumb and sick of nursery. I'm sick of nursery rhymes. Nursery rhymes are boring." Mrs. Droopy looked hurt. "Everything is boring to you, AJ," she said sadly. "I've tried so hard not to bore you. Please tell me, what is not boring to you?" I put it on my thinking cap. "Well, not really. I tried really hard to think of something that wasn't boring. Trick bikes." I said. Trick bikes aren't boring." Chapter 12. The Proof. Page number 79. It was the middle of our afternoon snack time. I traded my pretzel sticks with Ryan for his cup of chocolate pudding. Suddenly, I heard something yelling down the hallway. "Watch out! Coming through! Out of the way!" "I wonder what that could be," said Miss Daisy. The yelling got louder. Everybody in the classroom turned around just in time. Class turned around just in time to see somebody ride into our classroom on a trick bike. It was Mrs. Droopy. She was wearing sunglasses, knee pads, elbow pads, and a floppy black T-shirt that said "Bikers for Books." She had combed her hair to make it stick all spiky. Hey, dudes," she said as she skidded to stop right in front of my desk. "I just landed on awesomely tweaked tail whip with a Superman seat grab to a toothpick grind. You should have seen it. It was really sick." Everybody put down their snacks and gathered around my desk to look at Mrs. Ruby's cool bike. "I didn't know you knew how much about trick biking, Mrs. Ruby," I said. "I'm not Mrs. Ruby," Mrs. Ruby said. "I'm a professional trick biker." "You're not," we all hollered. "You're Mrs. Ruby, the librarian." "I'm not." "R2, I'm not." "R2." It certainly looked like a trick biker to me," said Miss Daisy. That's when I came up to the most genius idea in the history of the world. Mrs. Ruby's tattoo. Mrs. Ruby's tattoo. I remember that she had a picture of her heart on her belly button. "You're Mrs. Ruby," I said. grabbing the bottom of her t-shirt. And I can prove it. Oh, stop that! Mr. Droopy giggled. Oh, stop that! Mr. Droopy giggled. I'm ticklish. When I yanked at her shirt, 3 books fell out. One of them hit my snack on my desk. The cup of chocolate pudding went flying. It splashed all over Mrs. Droopy's tummy. It almost covered up the tattoo of a heart, but we still could see it. It's Mr. Droopy, Michael shouted. The proof is in the pudding. Hey, Ryan shouted. Check out these books. Ryan picked out the books that had dropped on the floor. They were books about trick biking. One of the books showed how to do tricks, and the other 2 were about famous trick biker. Cool. I didn't know that they made books about trick biking, Ryan said. So that's how you know so much about trick biking, Mrs. Droopy. I said, I don't know what you're talking about. Mrs. Droopy said, I'm a professional trick biker. Can I check out these books out of the library? Asked Michael. No, I get them first, Ryan said. Hey, I was the one who found them, I said. Miss Daisy grabbed all the books. Gee, I don't know, AJ, she said. You said that reading was boring, so you wouldn't want to read these books. Yes, I would, I shouted. Please. Well, okay, Miss Daisy said, as she handed each of us one of the trick bike books. But if you don't bring these back on time, Mrs. Ruby is going to lock you in the dungeon on the 3rd floor. We all looked at Mrs. Ruby. Later, dears, she said. And with that, Mrs. Ruby went pedaling out into the hallway. I felt sorry for Mrs. Ruby. She is the loopiest librarian I ever met. I think she got a big problem. We're going to do all we can to help her, but it won't be easy. If you like this video, please hit the like and subscribe. Bye.